Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Mocast. And today, since we are talking about a tank, Marcelian is nowhere to be found. He's trying to convince devs to fix Red Paladin, but I don't think he's ever going to come back. But that out of the way, if you don't know who our guests are today, if you haven't seen any of the previous Warrior podcasts for protection or haven't ever been into Skyhold, we have today Nomeratur and Jackey. Very, very big brain Prot Warriors that are probably always in Discord. Man, I haven't been able to see a Prot Warrior question asked and you guys not answer. That's pretty cool. Maybe I haven't been there a lot, but I know I have had all of my questions answered. And that helped me out. How are you guys doing today?
I'm pretty alright. I'm feeling great. I just had a bath. I'm clean.
Yeah, pretty good. New talents are quite fun, you know. Not that we've got all of them yet.
Yeah, we're hitting with the pre-patch and everything. And yeah, today we want to talk a little bit about Prot Warrior, mostly how it's going to be looking in Dragonflight, but maybe we can touch about pre-patch as well. With the new talents, with all the changes and fixes, we can probably start. I don't know if last time there's been some time since we talked about Prot Warrior. But what I want to get from you guys is what your overall opinion of Protection Warrior is so far with what we know up to this point.
You could definitely say that Prot Warrior right now in Dragonflight has never been stronger, outside of maybe Emerald Nightmare. But I wasn't really active at that point, so couldn't really tell.
It was stronger in Emerald Nightmare for a different reason, though.
I mean, I think uncapped ignore pain or something, was it?
Well, it was 90% ignore pain, but it also brought uncapped leech to the raid, basically. You keep stacking Prot Warriors to get more leech. So, yeah, that's why it was considered pretty strong. And Dragon Scales, of course.
But
they should have brought that back.
Now it's for a totally different reason. So what exactly do you guys think is making Prot Warrior strong in the current version of Dragonflight?
We got a severe talent rework. Everyone got that, right?
Yeah.
Bare bones wise, we're pretty much the same as in Shadowlands, but we just got like 4 legendaries stacked on top of that and a bunch of new tools for every situation. We don't have to choose between anger management and block talents anymore. We have 4 separate block talents that we can pick if we want 250% uptime on it, if we choose to do so. And a bunch of sources of self-healing that we didn't have before. So that's the meat of the rework.
Due to the rework, it's basically become way easier to play, basically, compared to what it was in Shadowlands. Actually, compared to what it was in like the past 3 expansions, to be honest. It's got a lot easier. So that in turn makes it a lot better. Because you don't have to think as much.
Being a Prot Warrior fan and playing it throughout Legion, I feel like what we have right now in terms of Dragonflight, and I hesitate to kind of say this, and I'm a little bit worried by saying this because I don't want people to get the wrong idea, but it feels that as a tank, it's maybe close to, so far from what we had right now, perfection in terms of design. I'm not sure how many tweaks they can do, and I'm not talking specifically about numbers, but more so as to the tools available, what kind of defensive tools you have, what kind of offensive tools you have, what you kind of have to sacrifice to get one or the other. It feels like they're nailing the balance more and more each time. And in terms of the tuning of Warrior, compared to what we know about other specs and other classes, since we are in the tuning phases and we see buffs and nerfs here and there. So compared to every other spec that we know of, that you might be following or not, what do you guys think of the overall approach in terms of tuning for Prot Warrior? Because for anybody who hasn't seen the original beta numbers, Prot Warrior was doing more damage than DPSs, and it has been tuned down. And although the pre-patch is what it is right now, I feel like it's in a decent spot numbers-wise. I don't feel like I'm overwhelmingly doing more damage than everybody else, but then again, it could be just the pre-patch. We'll see how that translates into Dragonflight. What do you guys think of where we are and possibly what we might be expecting going into Dragonflight, since we are in the pre-patch right now.
Okay, I've talked about this a lot in Skyhold already and some other Discords. On the surface, it's definitely obvious to a lot of people that Prot Warrior is just factually really, really strong right now. But especially in the pre-patch currently, my opinion is that Vengeance Demon Hunter is actually better, like by a decent margin, but harder to play, because right now through their new talent tree and their covenants and stuff like that, they're practically twice as strong as they're gonna be in Dragonflight, because they can double up the frailty stacks and their fiery brand uptime. But disregarding that fact, I think currently on the beta, every single tank is roughly in line. Obviously, Warrior slightly ahead, not overwhelmingly ahead as it used to be, because people are slowly starting to realize, okay, actually Blood Decay is absolutely immortal if you play it correctly on beta, as well as Vengeance Demon Hunter. They are a bit more spiky than Warrior. Warrior is just clean. Like you have, like, block currently is overwhelmingly strong. Like, it's never been this strong baseline, but other tanks can just keep right up. Brew just got a recent HP self-healing nerf, so they are a bit struggling on the survival side of things, but still, like, overall relatively fine. They are defensively also fine, but offensively they're starting to lag a lot on Dragonflight. But there are no severe outliers in terms of damage output. It's just a slight tuning nerf that I would suggest for Warrior.
I mean, it's kind of very much the same. I've only really tested on Prot and only seen what the others are like through Discords and other conversations. But I mean, yeah, we're strong, but it's not like so my raid. I have a Guardian Druid, and we did all the raid testing, and like they weren't struggling to survive the same I wasn't struggling to survive. It's basically the same. Their damage is just rubbish after the last tuning pass on them. So like, I don't know, it's tough to say because obviously I haven't put enough in, and I think everyone who's speculating or has spent a couple of hours on beta on each class and can then, you know, say this one's really bad or this one's really good is just a bit dumb. I mean, Nom spent like 50 hours or something solely on Prot Warrior on the beta. I think he's probably the one with the most time spent on it, probably. So, you know, and he talks to the people that spend the same amount of time on the other tank classes, where we get people come in and go like, oh, so-and-so said X after doing one dungeon on it on beta, and it's like, well, then he's obviously not put any time into it. Why is he saying that? Like, why are they saying that? I don't know. But I think in terms of tuning, they're all pretty much the same in survivability. Obviously, Nom said Vengeance Demon Hunter and Blood Decay spike more, but they're designed to spike more.
Yeah.
We're designed not to spike. That's the whole point. Sure, does that mean our self-healing is a little bit over the top with impending victory in Indom? It is a little bit, but we haven't really got any final proper tuning stuff yet. Like, a lot of the mythic testing was done in pretty much gear that's over gearing the content when you get there. So it's hard to say. But yeah, I think relatively equal to the other tanks. It's just that the fact that because they've given us so much free block uptime, everyone's like, this is really strong. And it's like, well, block is strong. They've just made it easier to have block. Like, you know,
yep.
We kind of had it at the end of Shadowlands, right? People were finally coming around going like, oh wait, Prot Warrior is actually really good. Yes, because you can have 90% block hits. Suddenly it's really good, you know? They've just given it us from the bat this time, which, I don't know, people seem to be complaining about, which, like, people in Skyhold seem to be like, oh, I don't like it, we're getting block all the time, and we're like, and that's a problem?
Yeah,
I don't see it as a problem. Like, it's good for me.
People always complain no matter what, but what's important is that the spec is fun and it's not. I'm trying to think of, you know, the example of Blood Decay coming into Sepulchre, where it was oppressingly strong and in not enough necessarily fun way. Not for me, at least, since the power that it came from, you know, the tier set, and it changed the playstyle and the way the spec works. And it doesn't necessarily feel that way for Prot Warrior. As much of a fan I am of Conqueror's Banner and the Necrolord Prot Warrior playstyle, playing it through the last, I don't know, when was 9.2 released? Months ago.
I think February or something.
I can't remember.
It was
I log in once a week to raid now.
Was a while. I came around as a Prot Warrior, and I fell in love with the spec, and it's cool. But I can see like, okay, maybe this amount of passive rage gain, it's not. I wouldn't be that sad if I let it go. But it's nice to see that, I don't know, at least from let's say from an average Prot Warrior's perspective, looking at the talent trees, I feel like some of that rage gain has been added into Blood Surge. And when playing Blood and Thunder, I can feel the intake of rage, and that's actually pretty cool. So this is something that I wanted to kind of ask as well, considering that, correct me if I'm wrong, but at the beginning of recent expansions, one of the main, or maybe let's say the biggest problem that Prot Warrior had was rage economy. It kind of always felt like at the beginning of the expansion it was too slow, and as you get more gear on Prot Warrior over the months, over the patches, it starts to get stronger. We can, go back to BFA, although, there was some Azerite traits and other stuff that was making it strong. But this time doesn't really feel that way. And I've played it at lower levels in Dragonflight. I've played it at high levels with basic gear. I played it at max level with dungeon gear and with raid gear. And it kind of felt all right. What do you guys think of the rage generation of Prot Warrior going into Dragonflight, at least at the beginning? Because we know it kind of gets to be okay by midway to late expansion.
That's definitely a first right now in Dragonflight, where you don't feel like you're actually like lacking stuff, right? The rage generation is fine, because like the larger the pulls get, the more rage you gen. I have a very fun clip of that on Twitch from yesterday, where my entire rotation is only Ignore Pain and only Revenge. That's all I do. Because I think Blizzard's goal with Dragonflight launching, especially, is like the main feedback is the beginning of patches, or where the first expansion patches always feel slow, sluggish. They just don't feel fun, right? Like the game only gets fun when everything is unlocked, when you have like these huge amount of stats accumulated over the course of an expansion. And this time I feel like Blizzard may like attempts the approach of, okay, we're gonna give you player power in the beginning, because like we're not gonna get more borrowed power throughout the expansion, or at least that's the proclaimed goal of Dragonflight. So we're getting all of it up front, all of it ungated. We don't have to use a tome to switch talents. We have several builds, and so on and so forth. So with all those tools right up in the beginning, it just feels amazing to play right from the start. You don't have to it's not sluggish. You don't have any downtime. The rotation is smooth because of the rage income. And yes, you will feel the loss of Banner, definitely, because right now in the keys I've done yesterday, Banner is literally 25% of my rage gen. But I'm also obviously lacking the cooldowns that I will get in Dragonflight, so they will make up for a bit of it. And I also have like 2 times as much haste as I have on beta right now. But that's fine. Like it still plays really, really well. So it's still very rewarding to play the class, even at the very beginning of a patch with low haste. That's the biggest takeaway. It's just it feels very fun to play. It's smooth, and you have your block up time.
Yes, that's good. And what is your take, Jakey?
I think that depends though. Like obviously Nom's been doing the dungeon stuff and I've done raid testing. Pretty much that's basically the split that's actually happened. You're probably going to feel the lack of rage or haste in single target, to be honest, at the start, compared to AoE. Because obviously Blood Surge, you've only got one target, and it's just not doing the same. And obviously you've still got some talents to help you out, but the way the tree is, like you can't pick up. You might be able to sacrifice a point for instigate, but you're probably not going to. It changes slightly when the less targets you get, basically, that you get less and less rage income, and that's you still get more, say, than you did in Castle Nathria. And so again, as I said, like they're trying to make it easier, well, I've said it in Skyhold many times, they're trying to make it easier to play tanks because they want more people to play tanks. And like a big difference between a good and a bad Prot Warrior at the start of an expansion is how good is your rage management. That's still less of a thing on single target, but I think like first few weeks it's still definitely going to be slightly a thing because you've just not got the extra targets for Rend to tick and Deep Wounds to tick and just give you Blood Surge procs all the time. You've only got that one target for some of the bosses. Sure, some of them are. There's like a 4 target boss, which is just going to be real fun because you're just going to be spamming everything. But some of the single target bosses, not so much, probably. And I don't think there's a fix to that until you get some more haste and stuff. Maybe there's a build we haven't thought of yet that just gives you a load of haste, or a load of crit, a load of bleeds, or a load of rage or something. I don't know, but yeah, you definitely feel it in single target. Like I was feeling it yesterday in raiding a little bit sometimes. If I like misplayed like a tiny bit, you might drop banner for like a second, but you obviously still on cooldown anyway to get out so long. But it's like.
Yeah, I can see that.
Those things.
Like from my testings on dummy is you have to be conservative with your rage at times. Obviously, you also don't have like 3 of the cooldowns that we have in Dragonflight. The biggest thing I found for single target or rage management is just don't play barbaric training. Just do not play barbaric training and you'll be fine.
Yeah, so that's kind of gone. But like the loss of even having like a like burst rage from like last stand or something, like it's you do feel it. So sometimes in testing where I'm like, oh, I'll just use last stand, and then I'm like, wait, I'm not taking nerving focus because it's not needed. Like you can't take it. There's no point available to give it.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, yeah, you basically have to think about your rage a little bit. Which if you've just come into the spec now or see last season of Shadowlands, you're not going to be thinking about, I have to keep some rage back to do things later down the line. You're just going to think about spamming it, which is where some people might come into an issue. But that's solely a single target sort of raid environment. In Mythic Plus, you'll be fine because you'll have so much raid from AoE anyway. You know.
I think that's not necessarily that bad. I'm not sure if with an unnerving focus, you are mostly talking about now, right? I assume that in Dragonflight it might be a little bit more, free to pick it if you want, or is this?
No, you don't have the talent points.
Not even. All right. Okay. Well,
from what we know, from what we've thought would be the best builds to have, you don't have the point to take it.
Like obviously you have the freedom to play around as you will. But so far from what I've seen is just it's not efficient to pick that point. And like ideal scenarios, you pick bolster and unnerving together, so you have more frequent access to it. But it's just overkill. Like you're just wasting 2 points just to get a bit of rage that you can make up in other talent points, which aren't as bursty, but they're still there. Like across a fight, they prove more useful.
I guess unnerving focus worked a little bit better with banner since the burst in rage could trickle down over a longer period of time, giving it that burst of extension of banner. I would imagine that was pretty good. Plus, you didn't really have to sacrifice much to get it in Shadowlands as opposed to Dragonflight. And with that in mind, I did want to touch on another thing since we're talking a little bit more about the talents. I've looked at as many builds as I could that people are doing and played a little bit myself, and I've noticed even not just in pre-patch but in Dragonflight as well, there are very few builds that pick what's the talent that increases instigates. Yeah, you guys mentioned it as well, but there seems to be, at least from a design perspective, a little bit more of a focus on weapon attack speed with Furious Blows and Instigate, and I think there's Wild Strikes as well with more haste. It sounds like, at least on paper, without actually knowing the numbers, that you could passively increase your rage generation with Devastator since you just attack faster. Is this going to amount to anything significant? Since you would probably think of these would all go really well with Sidearm as well, right? How do these feel? Or are these like under tunes and not going to make it into an actual build?
Sidearm is very good. Let's put it out there. It's like 1% of your damage. It's not worth taking it, to be honest. Instigate, I'd love to take it, and in my pre-patch raid build, I was taking it just because you have an extra point, and it was like put it in bolster, or which I don't need because I don't need the block, or put it in instigate. I'll put it in instigate straight away. I'm not sure because we haven't really run the maths. I don't know if anyone has, but I was trying to get into my enhanced shaman group yesterday in raid and was denied because apparently it's not good or worse than DPS. And I'm like, I have like 6 talents that, interact with auto attack speed. It's gonna be massive. And like there's even like a sizable difference between having battering ram and not having battering ram, like with how many shield slam procs you actually get. So like if you have an enhanced shaman, you kind of want to be in that group if you can be, to be honest.
Absolutely.
And
like
in raid, you're pretty much going to take every one apart from sidearm and instigate probably in Dragonflight. We have talked about it, and I think I've tried a few builds with instigate, but in raid testing, but it's like that point can just be spent somewhere better than instigate, really. Like it's a nice to have and it's a want to have, but it's like top of the tier of the talents you don't take because you haven't got enough talent points to take it basically.
Yeah, there are just more lucrative talents out there that just prove more useful. Like Ravager, for instance. A lot of people don't like Ravager because, like, oh, it's a 1.5 minute cooldown now, and the rage gen of the Ravager halved, but the damage output is exactly the same. And on pure single target, from my testings, Ravager still makes up for over 3% of your damage, even on just one target, even if it's just a 1.5 minute cooldown. It's this large of a percentage, and it's just gonna rise in AoE, obviously. So my initial thought was, okay, it's a long cooldown. It only generates 50 to 60 rage because there's a tiny need bug with that Ravager spell. So I thought, okay, over 1.5 minutes, surely instigate can generate more rage over that window. But it's actually pretty much the same that Ravager generates.
It was about 5% yesterday, in my raid for my damage, by the way.
Wait, Ravager?
Yeah.
Yeah, like it slaps. Like it's a huge button. Everybody who's like not picking it because they don't like it, they're just shooting themselves in the foot and missing out on a lot of damage. Regarding instigate again, yeah, we have a lot of attack speed talents, wild strikes, which increases your attack speed every time your auto attack crits. For example, in my keys yesterday, I had 75 to 80% uptime on wild strikes, which means my auto attacks were permanently, or close to permanently, 10% quicker, which also works out to more shield slam resets through Devastator, which means just more Devastator damage, which also means more rage through War Machine, because War Machine increases your auto attack rage generation. Then you can couple that with Battering Ram from Shield Charge, which increases your auto attack speed by now. It increases it by 20%. And increases your auto attack damage by 20%. And as of yesterday's hotfix, also Shield Charge's crit chance and crit damage are also increased by 20% instead of only 15%. The combination of all those talents makes it so on pure single target, melee damage becomes your second highest source of damage, which is crazy. And from my dummy testing, just by investing the point into Battering Ram instead of I think Thunderlord, was it? Or some other talent, I forgot which one. I gained about 2k DPS.
Ooh.
Overall.
In single target?
In pure single target, yeah. Like,
yeah, Battering Ram after the buff just became like a pretty much, you kind of want it. It's a single target.
Before the buff,
you do so much damage.
Before the buff to Battering Ram, it was only attack speed and only the crit chance on shield charge and crit damage. But then they found out, like, yeah, this talent is actually only like a 1% DPS increase over not having it. So we're just gonna buff it. And now they buffed it again, where they added auto attack damage to it. And through all those many means of attack speed increase, it's actually really valuable for priority damage. And obviously it's very satisfying to see those 120k crits from shield charge. And for those who don't know, shield charge is off global cooldown because it's a charge ability, and all of the charge abilities are off global cooldown. So it's just really satisfying. It also hits twice on single target because it reads like, okay, it deals 15k to my main target and then 6k to AoE, but that AoE also hits the main target. So it's a really, really fun button to press, especially for that instant rage generation. Like it's just awesome. I like the button very much.
This is so cool, because I was looking at it when it was initially added, and I thought, okay, it sounds like this could be the replacement of Reprisal, because it's but that's with the Champion's Bulwark. That's what it sounded like to me. Because I was looking at all the other tanks getting their main legendaries and or main tier sets, putting into the talent trees. Like, okay, so is where you're gonna get its tier set? Okay, yeah, we have Violent Outburst, which is what it is now. But we're not getting Reprisal. And with my conversations with Moi over the years, Reprisal has been oppressively strong, and I was kind of okay with it not having it, and now seeing with all the other shield block increasing talents, I think it would be a little bit too much, maybe a little bit overkill. But I'm glad to see that shield charge has gotten an upgrade since initially when I tested out Prot Warrior on beta was let's say lesser of the options that you could pick. Do you guys think that this might actually become a part of your raid builds, considering that single target does so well? Would it even have applications in AoE, or would you go for other capstones or other builds to optimize your output?
I mean, I'm pretty sure in the raid build I was like, this is probably the best one, had both capstones for shield charge in it, to be honest. I mean, it's 45 seconds, so it's not even the new Reprisal, and you don't need to move out of range to use it. You can just stand in melee. Like, it's got no minimum range, so you just send it, basically. And it lines up with Demo Shout if you're not running Thunderlords as well, so you can always increase it with Booming Voice, basically. So it's a really strong button for raid. I'm not sure about the Reprisal part, the Mythic Plus. I would kind of like to test, which I haven't, the increased Ravager damage one instead of that place, because I think you'll have enough block. But yeah. None might know the difference in that. Yeah. But
regarding that, in Dragonflight, for me, or from my testing, Champion's Bulwark is absolutely hard locked in. You will always, in every situation, play that talent. It's good damage, it's on-demand shield block uptime. And if anything, before switching out Champion's Bulwark, you might just start dropping heavy repercussions instead once you realize, okay, I can get like pretty much close to 100% block uptime without heavy repercussions, which I can get already in pre-patch right now with just Champion's Bulwark and Enduring Defenses. I can maintain shield block 100% of the time with only those two. But that's also because we have like excessive amounts of haste. Like only at like the dummy without ITF, I'm sitting at 43% haste. So I'm not even socketed into it. Like once you get more and more haste, you can talent out of heavy repercussions. But I think you will constantly keep Champion's Bulwark. It's just so much quality of life that you don't have to worry about. And it's just good damage, good rage gen. And to me, it is the Reprisal replacement, because it doesn't come with the difficulty of having to charge weave in and out and you have to play around it. It's just every 45 seconds you just hit the button, you get 8 seconds of shield block because of Enduring Defenses, and you get your 50 rage and free revenge. That's practically the same as hitting Intervene on cooldown from Reprisal and also they're just doing one charge with it, which is basically what you have done in and plus with just Reprisal. You just did one charge every 45-ish seconds, one intervene every 30 seconds on cooldown, and you should be golden. People stress it way too much.
Mm-hmm. I think this actually segues into my next question, the Reprisal one. Now that we have Yes, finally, the clap build back with Unstoppable Force, and it's now playable. Not to mention all the synergies that it comes with Blood and Thunder, and so on. In AoE, and this might be something more related to pre-patch, and if it is, let me know. But if this translates slightly into Dragonflight, I find myself in playing, at least in AoE, that I don't have enough globals to press Revenge sometimes if I want to keep up Thunderclap every time, especially if I go Thunderlord. I will 100% want to press Thunderclap on cooldown every second global. So what happens to Revenge then? Because there are plenty of talents right now. Barbaric Training, we talked about it earlier. If it ever becomes so that, Rage won't be that much of a problem anymore. We have Seismic Reverberations making it into a talent, and a bunch of other Revenge upgrades that we can get, Best Surf Cold and so on and so forth. So what happens as a playstyle? Maybe there's like a priority that will simplify it as well, but would we like slowly move out of Revenge, or is Revenge still the king and you just weave it in with Thunderclaps?
This is where it gets a bit weird, because I'll go on record, I hated Thunderclap spam. I thought it was dumb. I thought it completely dumbed down the class too much. Like, you're basically pressing a one button and it's a rage generator. Like, that's just so dumb. In Dragonflight, you literally have, like, in initial burst of a raid boss, I press maybe Thunderclap once or twice in my avatar, because you got so many other things to pop out. You got your Ravager, you got your Dragon Roar, you got your Shield Charge. I know it's off GCD, but you've got so many buttons you're trying to process your brain to fly through. But by the time you get into your normal rotation, you're like halfway through Avatar already, and you're like, oh, okay, well, whatever. I tend to still favor Revenge more. I think that's just more playstyle coming from Shadowlands. But I don't think it changes much in terms of damage pretty much on single target. Like, if you're in Avatar, obviously you try and make sure you hit Thunderclap all the time. If you're not, you're going to prior Revenge over Thunderclap, basically. Until you get to like a certain amount of targets, and then you want to outburst Thunderclap on, and then it keeps scaling up because of all the talent stuff we have. But I don't think Revenge is ever going to totally die, because it still hits hard. That's the thing. Where Thunderclap also hits hard.
Just a quick follow-up to what you're saying. So if that's, let's say you don't like clap spamming, and let's add to that the fact that there's not a big difference, at least in single target, since that's what we're talking about right now. Would that influence your talent choices in any way? Would you like go away from Unstoppable Force? And I don't think going away from Blood and Thunder is very smart. At least you can just keep up Rend.
You're never going to go away from Blood and Thunder. I would either pick like Immovable Object, to be honest. But it depends. Like, obviously, you're going to probably... Well, I'm going to go for what's more damage, and I'm just going to suck up and play it. Like, it's not as bad as it was in BFA. Like, you're not constantly thunderclapping, because you've not got Bomb, and you've not got all the other modifiers. It's just, Thunderclap hits hard, and you have UF, but you don't have, like, Bastion of Mind stuff that makes it, like, crazy damage. It's just... it's just, it hits hard in Avatar. Make sure you hit it in Avatar. Outside of Avatar, okay, there's Revenge. You can also weave Revenges into your Avatar as well. Like, it
and you should.
Kind of works out. Yeah, and you should. It's not just a one, I'm going to just press Thunderclap sort of thing. It, as I said, it's a bit weird. It's like, sure, you want to focus it, but it's not something you try and focus on. Like, the only thing I really hated about it was trying to actually min-max Show of Force on a single target. It was so irritating.
Yeah, like
in Avatar, it's so annoying.
The things you have to play around, if you want to do it optimally right now on beta, is a bit iffy, because your tier set bonus is, okay, you cast Revenge and then you deal 4% more damage and take 4% less damage, and 5% of your damage gains you Ignore Pain, which means it automatically applies Ignore Pain. You don't have to manually cast Ignore Pain to get Ignore Pain to then get value from Brutal Vitality. But that's another topic. And what I mean is, right now, the rotation is a bit... It's hard in the sense that you have so many things you want to press at the same time. There's too many things. Like, you want to press Thunderclap, you want to press Revenge, but you also want to press Shield Slam to generate Rage, which you can spend on other sources to get more cooldowns through anger management, more outbursts. And then you have your 700 cooldowns lined up. So your opener is just, you send like your avatar, your Ravager, then you have your Demo Shout, then you send your Shield Charge, then you send your Thunderous Roar, and then you can start doing your rotation. Technically, even like I'm not even certain right now if you're supposed to press Thunderclap as your first global on single target to apply Rend, to then go through your cooldown, like just sending out your cooldowns to get them on cooldown because it's a huge amount of burst.
I was pressing Shield Slam, then Rend, basically. Well, then Thunderclap.
I don't know if
there was a period of time where I had to apply Rend, which was horrendous.
Oh yeah, that's
so glad they got rid of that.
The time before they reworked Blood and Thunder, where you had to, I charge my target, I have to generate Rage, to then apply Rend, and then I can start my rotation, which that was infinitely worse.
Was awful.
It was the most horrifying thing to play around. Like, I set up a global right now that does nothing. Because the intent of setting up this global is, that's 20, like it takes for 20 seconds, and then I spread it. Absolutely horrendous. But circling back to the Thunderclap versus Shield Slam versus Revenge stuff, in single target, obviously the goal is to permanently hit Thunderclap and Shield Slam on cooldown. Shield Slam being your highest priority over everything, because it is 30% of your damage in single target. It is just outright your highest single target DPS button. Which is why I'm so confused, like very much confused, why a lot of people on beta have completely ignored all Shield Slam talents and just went, I go full bleed, because they kept getting baited by, I have so many bleeds, I have to build into bleed. Shield Slam, it doesn't do that much damage as much as my like Rend and Deep Wounds, which is just false.
To be fair, we were baited by Bloodborne for a while. And then you decided to sit on the targets and do even more testing. And then you're like, it's actually crap. Let's just not use it.
On top of them nerfing it. Like everyone that had beta access early on and just saw the build was like, it feels terrible to spend 2 points into Bloodborne because, it sounds like an amazing talent. We've had some people actually comment like, but Bloodborne is so good. Bleeds are like 40% of your damage. And like, no. Bleeds are not 40% of your damage.
There was also the issue of obviously it was only just heroic dungeons. So like obviously your bleeds were probably going to be pretty much highest because nothing's alive long enough for anything else to do any damage. And that's also, I know it got buffed, but that's also why we saw Tough of Nails actually come through. Tough as Nails come through when Mythic Plus came out and people were like, hang on, and raiding because things were alive long enough for the talent to actually do something. And you're like, that actually does or competes pretty well with like 1 point in Bloodborne, and we don't really want Bloodborne, so we want Punish underneath. That's why we go that way, basically.
I've even seen people just forego Punish and to then pick some other AoE talent, which I can see some argument for that being made because bosses right now aren't really dangerous, and obviously 80% of the dungeon is still made up by trash. So it's a minimal optimization that you just get out of that. I don't see, like, it gets too niche at that point to just, I'm gonna remove Punish and get one Bloodborne. That's like, I give 3% up of my single target to gain 1.5% of AoE. Yeah,
but also like from a raid perspective, I'm not dropping Punish just for the damage.
No, in raid you should never drop Punish.
Not for the damage reduction, just for the damage. I mean, like we've touched on it that like, Nom saying like, I might drop heavy repercussions and stuff. I would just instantly say no, because you want 100% shield block uptime, regardless if you're tanking or not, just because Shield Slam build is your most damage build, which is really sad. Because you could make a really fun, and I did play a really fun execute build, but because execute is rubbish, it doesn't do as much damage as just having permablock and pressing Shield Slam, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's also a huge topic regarding execute. Another one of these bait talents like Bloodborne is, I can now talent into Massacre, I can talent into Juggernaut, and then go ham on the execute train, since we also have the crit talent, Cruel Strikes on the Warrior tree, which increases the critical strike damage of execute. And they're like, I have 3 execute talents, surely it's got
a...
Sudden Death I also have as well. Yeah, Sudden Death you actually also are supposed to play on the single target build, because it still hits hard for free global, like it costs nothing. And it is harder than any other spell besides Shield Slam. So then you still pick that. But if you go full execute train, you're just gonna lose damage.
Like, I mean, to be fair, when I tested it, Juggernaut was broken and it was still the arms version. Because I came up with the premise of, you could literally stack execute from the start of the fight through sudden death, and then like you just have perma, full Juggernaut stacks. But when we tested it, and I doubt you can do it now, you don't get that many procs, so you just lose Juggernaut buff. I mean, it's supposed to last longer on proc, but it was like 11 seconds or something. So like, but yeah, because of the nerf to execute as well, it just wasn't worth it. It's just like, it just doesn't hit hard enough, like at all. Even if you've got it up for like the whole fight, it's just kind of sad.
Oh, I noticed that I did some raiding with my guild yesterday, and I was like, looking at what people are using, is like, okay, punish, it makes sense. Shield Slam does a buttload of damage. But I remember at the beginning of 9.2, or not at the beginning, I don't know exactly when they buffed execute for Prot Warrior. I think even added, because I don't remember we having execute throughout Shadowlands. Am I tripping right now?
Oh, we
have it.
You're tripping. We had the execute buff at 9.2-ish.
Yeah.
When they buffed it for arms, but it was like, but let's just include Prot as well. Might as well.
Because we technically have the arms execute, even though I'm still to this day going to fight for saying we should have the Fury execute and the Fury Whirlwind. Fury Whirlwind would be broken. Fury Execute wouldn't be broken.
Didn't Fury lose Execute?
It's just a generator. So it's on a 5-second cooldown. It's a generator, basically.
Yeah, so I was I picked every Execute buff, and it was so depressing to see how it went through, since I remember prior to this, the Execute phase for Prot Warrior being godlike and one of my favorite parts of any boss fight. Is it just the base tuning for executes, or because now it also has like a hasted cooldown? Is all of this captained together to make execute weak? Is with the current scaling, is it never going to be like something that you would prioritize over, at least in single target? Because it's kind of like a steep competition between Punish and Juggernaut at this point. I don't know if it's ever going to take it, but
you're never going to take Juggernaut in the current state of execute. Basically,
yeah,
it's just not going to happen.
They've nerfed execute because of the oppressive strength that was execute in Shadowlands. They've nerfed it from 170% of your attack power down to 105, which is over a 40% nerf of execute, just raw 40% nerf, coupled with the fact that we're losing banner, which is 22% strength increase and 12% AP through mastery, and 4 rage per second. All these things coupled together come together as a huge nerf to execute in itself. It just hits less. We cannot hit it as frequent because our rage gen is entirely is a lot lower at that point in the fight, as unless we have obviously infinite targets. But even then, execute is not really good. And it also takes 15 times to fully stack up now. Like they changed Juggernaut. We have Juggernaut, but it changed. The Shadowlands Juggernaut is we gain 8% crit chance, and we can stack it up 8 times, which comes out to I think was 45% or 40%. I'm really bad at math right now. So instead of getting the crit chance increase on Juggernaut, we get 3% execute damage increase, stacking up to 15 times for 20 seconds. Which means we have to execute 15 times to still get a weaker execute than we have had at Shadowlands. Which, and in pure single target, you can't just and also while weaving in your tier set, which is also a huge problem right now, is during execute, you kind of want to send all your rage into execute because it is still a damage increase, but it's just not really good. It's an increase, but it doesn't play really well from what I've played it. When I've played it, it was not very satisfying because you're just kind of starving yourself constantly with rage, but you can't keep up your tier set as well. Because the tier set bonus only lasts 5 seconds. So you have Revenge, then you have to weave in your Thunderclaps and Shield Slams on cooldown. And then between those 3 buttons, still want to weave in Executes. It's just awful. Like, right now I can't even tell if it's better to completely forego the tier set, which is 4% damage, to gain maybe 7% damage through spamming Execute. So that's a tiny trade-off, but you will get squishier because of that, because you don't have Ignore Pain anymore to really use. So I think just for regular, like say, cutting-edge content and so on, and just progress rating, I don't think you're gonna hit execute while you're actively tanking, as we've memed before. But I don't think. I think you're just better off just sending revenges.
I don't know. Yeah, it depends if you have the tier set or not. I mean, looking at my logs from yesterday, like I got 20 execute casts in on Guardian of the first ones, right? But that's because I don't have to prio revenge, right? That in execute at the moment, you can just spam it. And like in terms of stacking Juggernaut up, I hit every proc of sudden death I had, and it wouldn't have lasted me the entire fight. I had like loads at the start during Bloodlust, and then I had like 3 over the course of the rest of the fight, and I had like 1 or 2 in execute phase. I mean, I'm still going to try and hit it as much as I can in execute phase, but once I got tier set, like obviously you need to prior revenge, otherwise you're just gonna lose your tier set, which is kind of a bit sad.
With that in mind, talking about the tier sets, since I always go back to their initial statement that they don't want the tier set to alter your rotation and your talent choices too much. But it definitely sounds, although I don't know how much you're not using revenge outside of the tier set anyway, but how much do you guys think the tier set will impact your rotation as opposed to not having it or not playing it at all?
I don't think it changes, to be honest.
In M+, it doesn't really much now.
In raid testing, like I didn't even think about it, and I probably had full stacks all the time, because you probably hit revenge once every 5 seconds at least. I mean, if you're a BFA fan, you're probably going to not do that, even though you should do that anyway. As we've already said, revenge still hits hard. You don't just ignore the button and just press thunderclap. You still want to hit it. So I think in terms of rotation, it's pretty much the same, regardless of what content you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
From my testing in M+, you have roughly, without paying too much attention to it, I am tracking it because I want to see it, because like I want to feel bad when I don't have it up. So I get better. But in M+, you have roughly 80% uptime on the buff. That's with me going for all-out damage. Like my highest damage I've done was, I think, 60k in Academy on my Warrior. I did like 60k. And wait, actually, can I find the log real quick? And on single target, when I just played for damage, on single target, like, okay, I just play my rotation, I go for max damage, or what I felt like was max damage. I still need more testing to figure out it entirely. But I feel like I did pretty well with my 31k DPS. I only had 50% uptime on my tier set. Like 50% of the time, I just did not get the benefit of the free Ignore Pain. And 50% of the time, I could not maintain the buff because I had other buttons to prioritize over it. And that's just... like my suggestions that I've reported was, okay, include execute into the tier set, because during execute it's just a massive a rotation, and just make the buff last longer. Like, yeah, in AoE you're gonna keep it up a lot of times because you're gonna get more rage. So getting more rage means you can prioritize at a certain not a certain, at like a higher target count. You can forego shield slam usage and just send only thunderclap and only revenges. Because of Blood Surge, you get like an increased rage generation. The more targets you have, which is really nice, and then just send it away, and then you're gonna be fine because you're just constantly reapplying the tier set from revenge because it hits so hard because of 3 talents that we have that increases revenge damage, coupled with seismic reverberation, which also makes it deal 30%, technically 30% more damage if you have 3 or more targets. So it's a powerful tier set because of the IP application that you gain from it. But right now, I feel it's very clunky to play around in pure single target because you're gonna just prioritize other buttons.
Okay, fair enough. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the talents that kind of made a little bit of noise when they came out, and I haven't seen personally, I haven't seen a lot of use for it, but I've my test was fairly limited, so it's not very indicative of their potential value. What do you guys think of spell block, first of all, and then I guess disrupting shout is probably even more situational. But what do you guys think of these two talents, considering that at least spell block is at a choice node with tough as nails?
Funny situation regarding those two. I think Disruptor Shout is more useful than spell block. Right now.
I think honestly they're both pretty useless outside of extreme niche cases, to be honest.
Yes and no, because in raid, like thinking about raiding, tough as nails, its value is based on how much you're actively tanking. If there are situations in raid where you're not actively tanking, but you're okay, like take Sylvanas for example. Tough as nails is not going to do a lot on her because she just doesn't do a lot. Right, she just only casts her stuff, so you're gonna pick spellblock there because it does more. Right.
The thing is, from what I remember, the logs of the bosses I actually looked at from the new raid, most of it is physical though. So like, sure, there might be a few bleeds and stuff.
It's gonna need testing. Like, there's no definitive value we can slam on them right now. We need to test the encounters. We need to test what spellblock actually works on. And so far from what I've seen on Sense's spreadsheet. Yeah. Every single spell in one way or the other is blockable. Even AoEs, even some dots even, despite Blizzard specifically stating, or reworking Holy Shield, because they want Holy Shield to be practically be in line with how blocking works. So they nerfed Holy Shield, but Spellblock appears to be working on AoE effects, dots, and just, yeah.
But wouldn't that be just because Holy Shield is up 100% of the time and Spellblock
obviously
is on a 2-minute cooldown with 8 seconds.
It would be the dilemma between Spell Reflect and AMS. AMS works at everything, prevents debuffs. Have at it. Spell Reflect, we have to test every single instance. Can we reflect it? Can we deflect it? Or does it only apply the magic damage reduction? We have to test for these 3 things on every single spell while AMS just works. And then would have had the dilemma between Holy Shield and Spellblock as well. Where Holy Shield can block spells that Spellblock couldn't, so they just nerfed Holy Shield instead. But that's also a topic. Circling back to Disruptive Shout, there are a lot of situations where there are multiple packs where I feel like, actually now having this additional AoE interrupt on only a 1.5 minute cooldown is actually really beneficial, specifically talking in Ruby Live pools where there are several packs with multiple casters. Especially in the very beginning where you can pull 4 packs at a time, you Disruptive Shout every single mob, they all circle back to you, and then you can just AoE them down and just stun them with Shockwave and Monk and whatever else, and you can just slam them down there. So I find more application, at least in M+, for Disruptive Shout. Obviously in Raid, the talent is literally useless outside of extremely niche cases where there are actually mobs or bosses that are interruptible.
I don't know, it just seems like even in that case, you need all the casters to start casting or be casting at the same time for it to mean anything. And I've said in the past, there could be a mob that, has a deadly school of magic, but you disrupting shout on the one that isn't deadly to you, and then he suddenly just only casts this deadly school of magic, and you're like, oh, well, now I'm in trouble, because it's not a silence, it just stops them casting that school of magic, and it's like, oh.
Yeah.
And only if you hit them mid-cast as well. It should really be a silence for it to be more useful, in my opinion, but we'll see. Obviously, as I said, I haven't done any Mythic Plus, so obviously, or Dungeons, so obviously it could be much better. But
it's all just very niche.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You have to test, you have to see the encounters to deem it useful. It's not a blanket statement, okay, I pick Spellblock here. And then you have Academy, where nothing does any magic damage to the tank besides Veximus. And that's not even deadly amounts of magic damage, because the dungeon design right now in Dragonflight specifically is not, okay, every single damage mechanic is on the tank, every single hard-casted spell is on the tank. It's rather AoE effects going off. You have casts going onto your group rather than exclusively on the tank. It's not Halls of Atonement levels of, okay, we have four pulls, where each pack contains 3 casters which spam cast Wicked Bolt onto your tank to just destroy him, and your DPS, they just laugh at you because you died, and then they kick you because, oh, you're bad. Rather now, it's incentivizing DPS to actually kick, because otherwise they are gonna die. So there's not as much pressure on the tank, because as Blizzard has stated themselves, okay, we're removing Necrotic and Inspiring because we thought, okay, we're gonna make it a bit harder for tanks to play on Plus, but then they realized, oh, there's so much pressure on the tank for the routing and CC rotations on, like, I guess in a pug environment, you're the leader, you're saying what's happening. So they shifted that more to DPS. So yeah, like, oh, you didn't kick. Yeah, I guess you die.
Well, I think there's still just going to be the issue that even though they've added a load of talents that increase your damage for interrupting, for DPS, they're still not going to interrupt. They're probably going to blame the healer that they died because something went on, to be honest. That's pug life.
The circle continues. It never stops.
It's always the healer's fault.
Poor healers.
It's gonna be tough for healers this expansion.
Oh, you think so?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's that sucks for me since I might main one, but
great choice.
With that, I mean, what better time to do it, right? But I did want to touch on some things that I was slightly excited when I saw them, but the more I talked to you guys and the more I kind of tried to think of them in practice, they didn't really seem that great. So I'm talking about Bitter Immunity, which is maybe something that you might play more so than maybe Battlescar Veteran, since Battlescar Veteran seems to be like what they wanted Prot Warrior to have as a cheat death. I'm thinking, I don't know, Purgatory for Blood Decay, maybe that's the equivalent that Prot Warrior would have. What are your guys' thoughts on both of these talents, and do you see them useful? Are they niche? Are they undertuned? Are they good and people are just not playing them, or what's going on?
Bitter Immunity died the day they removed Bleed from it.
Yep.
Like, there's just no point in taking it anymore. Doesn't remove a Bleed, okay, we don't care. Plus, I play Dwarf, so...
No. God, dwarves, man.
You know, it's kind of like whatever. Battlescarred Veteran, I already know me, Nom, Moe, and Ergo are gonna literally have a war. This, like, the entire Dragonflight against the people that look at what the top Raider IO people are doing for their, like, what is it, plus 20 now? And like, we're going to have a war trying to explain to them that, like, you don't need to take this. Like, if you're doing content where you're not going to die, which is pretty much Mythic Raid after, like, you know, first few progress, like, after you progress, and, you know, pretty much all the keys apart from world first keys, you're never going to need it. You shouldn't take it. It's a waste of a talent point. Put it somewhere else. But people seem to love cheat deaths. So I don't know. I think they're a crutch personally, because you play worse when you know you can just die. That doesn't seem right to me. But then again, people play it and they don't play it correctly, because if you have it, you should play around it. You should use it as a cooldown, because it is a cooldown, and a very overpowered cooldown at that. But like, in your plus 20 a week, you're not going to pull enough to kill you, probably after a while. Maybe like week 1 or 2, but like after that, you'll be like, I don't need that.
Yeah. Like, regarding Bitter Immunity again, yeah, as Jakey said, once they removed the Bleed from it, it lost its niche, because it removes diseases, poisons, and curses. All of these which are dispellable by healers. And unlike me, you're going to be running in a comp that has a healer, which usually can just take away all these dangerous mechanics, if they are dangerous mechanics to begin with. Like, it's a 3-minute cooldown. Yeah, sure, it's a 20% heal on a 3-minute cooldown, but more often than not, these mechanics are just easily dealt with. The most dangerous mechanics are bleeds, because you can't remove them. Nobody can remove them other than Dwarf, which I hope they don't nerf. But even if they do, then, well, so be it. I still stay Dwarf because I like it. It's my favorite race in every fantasy game.
Good race.
And regarding Battlescarred Veteran, it's a really, really strong talent if you can make use of it. It's the failure protection talent, which Warrior has always lacked. It was always the most tank prone to failure, because if someone else made a mistake, you paid for it previously to this. If you played poorly, there's no way for you to recover. There's not like, okay, I took 30% more damage than intended, I just death strike it back up. Not really a thing. Has not really been a thing, but right now we also get impending victory, which is really, really nice. Mm-hmm. But this is just, okay, someone else made the mistake, you don't have to pay for it. Your healer can actually help you, because I would have said prior to Dragonflight, a warrior at 50% HP is practically dead. Like a good warrior does not drop below 80% HP. That's just how it went. If you drop to that threshold, someone made a mistake, but you had to pay for it. So this is the answer to that problem, where if you drop below 30%, you take 80% less damage for 8 seconds, and every healing you receive is increased by 100%. And it only has a 3-minute cooldown. And from what I've seen recently, I've ran the talent once in my testing so far. I guess I need to do a bit more to fully figure out how and when it procs. Because the first iteration of the talent was it procs only from damage instances once you have been hit below 30%. Like you were 30% HP, or 29% HP, then you take 1 damage point, and then the talent procs. But I think I've tested it after one reiteration of the talent, and it procced on the hit that put me to 30%. So similar to Will of the Necropolis from Blood Decay, but that hit or the mechanic of Blood Decay works in that way that it, I think, reduces the initial hit as instantly as well. That puts you below that threshold. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's why it's so strong, because okay, you get bounced from 100% to 20% HP, and it would have already reduced that hit by 30%. That's how Will of the Necropolis works, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. Comments or whoever else.
No, it's Blood Decay.
Yeah,
I'm thinking I know.
Yeah, I'm never going to play Blood Decay. I think it's boring, but yeah, it's off topic. And so, circling back to when is the pick case for Battle-Scarred Veteran? Good news is you only need to shift 1 talent point from my recommended build from a plus. You only need to shift 1 point for damage to shift it into Battle-Scarred Veteran to gain it, and then boom, you're in turtle build, you're fine. That's all you have to change. There's no more, okay, I shift 7 talents around to be tanky now. You're just tanky with the build I think made, and it's also very close to maximum damage output. So that's nice. But use case is progress rating, because obviously, like, you don't want someone to make a mistake or something to go wrong. You die and then you wipe the boss. Obviously, that's not ideal. So in like very early mythic progression, it's a good talent. And push keys, but I would not recommend it for anybody in the lower key region or just for your weekly key. Like, you can pick it, you're gonna lose a bit of damage, but I'm personally not a fan of these cheat death mechanics on every single person in the game, because I know going back to BFA, the rogue I pushed with, he was like, shit, I just proc cheat death. Well, I guess I have to play the game now. I was like, yeah.
Yeah, I could see the difference.
Guess what? I'm struggling here at Shrine of the Storms. I'm like 700 casters, and he's just jumping around with a sprint, not giving 2 shits. And it's like, yeah, I have cheat death. I can stand and stuff. Like,
So it sounds like a deeply personal problem. It does feel very niche, because I compared with Purgatory initially, and maybe Last Resort, and I don't know if that still applies for Vengeance right now, but Blood and Vengeance do usually spike, and it probably makes a little bit more sense. And in case of Blood, you do have Will of the Necropolis, which even if you do drop below, and that usually normally happens with the normal Blood rotation, you take less damage and you have time for that Purgatory to be resolved. Whereas with Prot Warrior, it's counterproductive to your playstyle. You're not supposed to play in a way where you're going to be dropping, and if that's the case, then obviously you have to, you're either using it to fix a mistake, or realistically, maybe the only situation is, I'm thinking, I don't know, you're going into a plus 28 and you're pulling 5 packs instead of 3, and you're like, all right, we can do this because I have this one thing. In that instance, maybe, yeah. And maybe for that's kind of cool. Or it could be just an introductory talent for new players. But in that way, I kind of feel like it's a trap because it kind of takes away from you learning the rotation when you know that you can die or, you know, when you can prevent that situation.
That's sort of the issue with cheat deaths, right? And like people learn to play with them and then suddenly they can't play without them. Because you have this thing, and you know, often to not, they'll probably die. They'll probably untalented die, and they'll be like, "Oh, I died because I didn't have Battle-Scarred Veteran or whatever." And it's like, well, no, you died because you didn't use like Shield Wall for this pull when you need it. And he's like, "Oh, well, I never really use Shield Wall because I'm just saved every 3 minutes anyway." It's like, well, okay, that's just not technically. Yes, you can play the spec like that now, but technically, that's not what you want to do.
And that's such a common theme as well, where people just like, yeah, I'm not really taking damage here, so I'm not using defensives. It's such a huge theme I see right now happening with Prot Warrior players.
Yeah,
I don't want to name name anyone, but there's several people playing suboptimally,
very suboptimally.
Actively avoiding pressing defensives because they don't feel like they need to. It's like, yeah, but you're actively trolling yourself by taking unnecessary amounts of damage because you're playing suboptimally. This, like, yeah, you're getting away with it, but what's the point?
It's pre-patch, like that's.
First of all, yeah, it's pre-patch. But even on beta, like I've seen some people run around with 30% block uptime, despite it being the easiest mechanic right now to manage for Warrior ever. Like we've asked for this for several expansions. At this point, we're like, okay, I just want my shield block uptime and just leave me alone. And now we have it, and then we have people actively avoid on just not using it because like, I don't feel like I need it. It's like, yeah, that's a whole separate issue with like the tuning and thing. But once you will need it, you've learned to play the class incorrectly. So you just get gobstomped. And then you're going to pull some other name I'm not going to name. You're going to complain to your healer that why didn't you heal me? It's like, what? Stop. Oh, first of all, if you're playing the game, stop blaming others. Just outright, do not, just don't blame others. There's always, like almost exclusively, or almost always a situation where you can say, oh yeah, I could have done this, I could have done that. Oh, well, if you get surprised, then okay, that happens. But I see way too many people just blame the healer or some other things. Where I'm like, no, you just didn't use shield wall. You used shield wall at 10%. Your healer was dead. You knew this mob was about to do a mechanic on you. Use shield wall at 60% HP, not at 10.
I use all my buttons perfectly, but I'm still squishy. Let's have a look at your log. You're not doing what you're saying. That basically sums up half our interaction.
It's a huge thing going on. People just thinking they're doing the thing, but they're not doing the thing. But it's a learning process. I don't want to fault rerollers right now too much.
Yeah.
But
I mean, will I run Battle-Scarred Veteran? Probably on the higher bosses when I first get there in Mythic. Probably, yeah.
That could be.
Apart from that, probably not. Like,
I won't. Because I play a very different game to.
Well, yeah, you play a completely different game to everyone. So, like,
Nom is a secret god that we should all learn from. I don't know about these types of players, but I get really excited when my HP bar doesn't move. That gets me going as a tank. So I try my best to.
Well, yeah, but that's the issue because of how tuning is right now. Your health bar just doesn't move anyway. So
yeah, pre-patch is a little
without mitigations. That's. You can just get away with not using block, and it's like, well, okay.
I didn't test pre-patch going into what we have right now. I was mostly into the beta thing, and hopping into my first kill, I was like, oh, we should do a 20. But I don't know how the tuning is for Pro Warrior in a 20. Should I just jump in a 20? And I start to pull more and more packs to see where my HP drop is gonna go. I had like 30 seconds of shield block uptime. It was pretty nutty. It's a once in a lifetime experience though. Which is I don't know. I think it's a fun time to play Prot Warrior.
Absolutely.
Kind of covered most things. I'm sure we could probably talk about every other talent and so on, but even with all the testing that we've had so far, I still feel like we're gonna get more and more info as we are actually in season 1, and with constant raid testing and more mythic key pushes where people don't die 100 times on Ruby life pools. So talking, definitely not talking about my runs 100%. But if you have anything else you want to add, guys, talk about anything else that is good to put it out there into the ether, into the world. Now's the time.
Don't pay too much attention to what streamers say right now about regarding the situation of tanks, because it's extremely hard to evaluate the tanks right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've put 50 hours into Prot Warrior and Dragonflight, and I'm still not sure about everything. Don't listen to those tier lists right now. I doubt those people have spent 50 hours on every tank figuring out. Well, let's say not 50 hours. Let's say they haven't even invested 5 hours per tank to figure out the builds or communicate with others.
Mm-hmm.
That's the main thing. They just make it up on their own, which is and then say, okay, like this tank is that good, this tank is that good. Warriors OP, other tanks are just trash. That's just take it with a grain of salt. Not everybody is as informed as they make out to be. Other than Marcellian and Flame, they actually asked theory crafters.
We haven't done performance tier lists in quite a bit, and whenever we do, it's like this is fun play.
It's a dumb thing. I don't get it. It annoys me so much.
It is
what's going to be meta. It doesn't matter. But I need to pug. Okay, I pug all my Mythic Plus anyway. I didn't have a problem in Season 1 Carthanathria. I didn't have a problem in Season 1 BFA being a Prot Warrior, and I pugged those entire seasons. Like, it's just...
it's
people make excuses for not being able to do things. It's just like, just play what you enjoy.
Exactly.
Then number 1, you'll be better at it because you actually want to play it. And number 2, then you'll get the results you want like that.
With that note, I mean, you guys probably know this better, but as far as we're concerned, doing guides for the average Joe since midway BFA and looking at constant logs, I've never seen a state where tanks have been as close to each other as they were in Shadowlands. I don't know, maybe with the odd exception in Sepulchre where Blood Decay was just like all over the place. But that's kind of like an outlier, and you know, the gaps between players or between specs at the extremes is way higher than at the middle, and it's like 99% of the people are in the middle. And I think that's fine. And to that, I kind of like the balance that they took in Shadowlands more so than they did in BFA at the very least, where tanks felt like I could pick any tank and do 20s and I would probably be just fine. All right. Anything else that we might need to cover? Mr. Jakey, if you have something to add.
Please stop presuming what tuning's coming based off what's happening in pre-patch. With so many people coming to Skyhold saying, oh, Prot Warrior is getting a nerf because it's immortal right now, and it's like every tank is immortal right now. It's pre-patch. The game is tuned around no tuning pretty much. I mean, 2 weeks ago in pre-patch, we would have had 400% increased damage on Shield Slam and Thunderclap because we would have had double Outburst. But in the final minute, they were like, actually, that's kind of dumb. Let's get rid of tier sets as well, right? People seem to forget that, and every time an expansion rolls around, people seem to forget that pre-patch is broken. I mean, think about BFA pre-patch was broken. You know, Legion pre-patch, you know, all of these things. Like, the game is just a different game in pre-patch, so stop presuming. We have 2 tanks at the moment with bugs. I believe it's Brewmaster and Paladin, right? Resonating Fist is kind of a bit buggy. Like, happens too much. And like...
It's not exactly buggy. It's technically performing as intended, but it just does way too much.
Yeah,
you have like Brewmaster has 7 billion damage instances to proc Resonating Fist, and so that way it looks like is a lot higher than it maybe should be, but I'm not a Brewmaster player. This
is just what we've been discussing on the Discord, and like Paladin's still like a little bit bugged, I think, some of the things. And it's just like, okay, well, Blizzard need to fix all the other issues with the other tanks, let alone the other specs. I mean, look at Shadow Priest and stuff. So like, don't presume all of this stuff is gonna like come down and suddenly Prot Warrior is gonna get nerfed to the ground, because
regardless, it's going to be difficult for them to nerf how the spec plays anyway. Sure, they can reduce the amount of shield block time we have, but that doesn't change how the fun of the spec. Won't change the way you play. It might change a few talents, but it's still going to be base what it is right now in pre-patch with a few extra buttons. Like it's in a really good spot. So don't naysay. Don't just presume you know what's going on.
Yep. I mean, people might often forget that pre-patch kind of combines multiple sets of player power. First of all, we have the new player power in Dragonflight, which is the talents. That's supposed to be the new player power. And now in pre-patch, we also have the covenants and certain conduits that can still work, and the legendary. So it's a lot of layers of things that it's kind of hard to balance around. And I would argue that it would be silly for Blizzard to try to balance pre-patch classes just so that some of them feel overwhelming. I think it's a nice time to feel stupid and to do stupid stuff. Because the more we go into Dragonflight, the more the score will be evened out, let's say, or something similar to that. And it's pre-patch. It's crazy. It's good. Enjoy it.
Yeah, it's the point of pre-patch. You meant to just enjoy the game. Just go and have fun. Do what you want to do. Now, people are asking at the moment what's meta, and it's like just play whatever you want. It doesn't matter. Go play Venthyr. It will be fun. If you find it fun, do it. It doesn't matter.
Oh yes, we are aware of those questions. We get them all the time. Play what you like, people. It is a good time to play WoW. It's looking better and better as we get closer to Dragonflight. And thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time out of your very busy schedules to talk about the coolest, baddest tank. And honestly, right now, it could actually objectively be one of the coolest tanks to play. So if there was ever a time to play Prot Warrior, play it now. And hey, if you have any questions about how to be a better Prot Warrior, and maybe you fucked up and you think you might need a cheat death, you can hop into Skyhold Discord and chat with the lads here. I have hardly seen any other class Discord where the top admins are so engaged with people answering questions than it is for Prot Warrior. Although I might be biased because I've been playing it a lot in the last year. But even so, you will most likely not go without your concerns answered. Then you will get the answers from the biggest brains out there. Brains like Nom and Jakey and other people that couldn't make it to the podcast, unfortunately. And hopefully we can revisit the spec. Well, I don't know, maybe halfway through season 1, once we know a little bit more, once things are a little bit more settled, and see how the evolution of Prot Warrior is, if you guys would join as well. So thank you once again, Nam. Thank you, Jakey. And
thanks for having me.
Thank you again.
It's always a pleasure, guys. And hey, if you want to check either of these two lads out, all of the socials and all of the links to anything and everything that they do will be down in the description, as always, outside of the Skyhold Discord that you can get them on. And thank you, you wonderful viewer or listener. If you are on Spotify or any other platform where we have the podcast, you can consider checking the YouTube version of the podcast, where you will have all the data there in the description. And we will catch you guys in the next Mocast episode, which hopefully will be in about a week. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe, stay clean. See you next time. Bye-bye.
With Shadowlands.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.